been a while since I've done one of these, but it's time for an episode of Regan's World Newsround. Let's dive into the news, guys. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is REGANELITE here with an episode of Regan's World Newsround, shall we put it. I used to call it World Newsround, but I stopped doing it after we started the Snowflake Corner. But since I cannot be here live and in person for a live stream, instead I'm going to be doing a couple of several different news articles that I've picked up here, just for quoting reference, just for you guys here. The time of this recording is on Tuesday at just past 3. So that's just for the reference, in case you're wondering if any of these articles or stories that I happen to give you, they may have updated or changed since then. So just wanted to put that caveat in there for you guys. So what I used to do, for those who don't know about the World's News Round, is where, like Regan's News Round, is basically covering stories of the world pretty much. And we're going to start with a very interesting one. Obviously, a lot of the talk has been this week especially in the UK, over the Rwanda deal, over the immigration bill. Well, France are having their own sort of things jumping all over the place here. This is from France 24. So France are to send controversial immigration bill to a special joint commission. So France government insisted on Tuesday that it would implement tough measures against illegal migrants as it's battling a political crisis following the rejection of its flagship immigration bill in the lower house of parliament. So essentially things are really not looking good in terms of their own immigration issues here. So in a surprise move on Monday, members of the opposition joined forces in the Parliament's National Assembly to vote down the controversial legislation without even debating it, sparking a political crisis. The rejecting is one of the government's flagship initiatives is a humiliating defeat for the French President Emmanuel Macron, who does not have a majority in Parliament and comes amidst a heated debate in society around immigration and security. Advocacy groups have criticised the bill, which seeks to toughen the country's immigration law, saying France relies on migrants, including undocumented workers, in a lot of industries. On Tuesday morning, Macron held a crisis meeting with Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne and key ministers at the Elysee, designed to maintain its bid to pass the bill and send the legislation back to the parliamentary committee the government had set. Macron rejected on Monday the offer from Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin, who had spearheaded the bill, to step down, instead ordering him to find new ways to break the deadlock and push the legislation through. On a visit to a police station in southeast suburbs of Paris, Darmanin said that whatever path we take, we want firm measures to be put in place by the end of the year to help law enforcement to fight illegal immigration. The return to people, originally proposed by Macron's centrist government with a mix of steps to expel more undocumented people and improve migrant integration, the draft law has been criticised by both the far right and the far left for opposing reasons. Darmanin on Monday urged the National Assembly to debate the bill, but lawmakers backed the motion to dismiss it by 270 voters to 265. So let's watch a bit of this here from France 24's correspondence to give us a better understanding of it, you guys.
Now, French lawmakers didn't even debate the controversial immigration bill on Monday before rejecting it. In a setback for President Emmanuel Macron, parliamentarians on both the left and the right were unhappy with the text that's being dubbed Darmanin's law. Macron refused Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin's offer to resign, asking him instead to try again. The government wants a bill that makes it both easier to deport illegal immigrants and integrate necessary low-skilled workers.
So they want to keep bringing low-skilled workers into the country because they rely on it, but they also want to make it easier to deport them. And it's obviously a difficult bill as it is, because you have people on the right saying that it's not far enough, obviously, and then you've got those on the left who are saying you're being too harsh. Feels a little bit familiar to similar things that what's going on in the UK right now.
For a closer look, I'm joined by Philip Turl, our international affairs editor, for once taking a look at what's happening in France. Philip, why was this law rejected? For politics or for the law itself?
Let's put it this way, shall we, Shona? I think this is purely a political manoeuvre on the part of the opposition in France to give President Emmanuel Macron and, incidentally, the Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin a bloody nose to say, look, we don't want this bill. And even if the public plebiscites it by 78% for.
So you can see there, according to them, according to it looks like that 78% of the French public are for it, but 22 are against it. Interesting there.
22% against, we don't care, we're going to vote it down, we're not even going to have a discussion about it in the National Assembly. Basically, we're going to pay you back because you only have a relative majority, the ruling party of Emmanuel Macron. Therefore, they can't pass legislation without support from the opposition. They've been pushing it through using a mechanism called the 49-3, which deprives the opposition of any debate. And that's been used 20 times since Elizabeth Borne became Prime Minister following the election of Emmanuel Macron to a second mandate last year in the month of
20
April.
times.
So 20 times it's been used already. That's not the record that
half.
was used by Michel Rocard back in the early 1990s, but it's been used 20 times to push through legislation without a debate. This time round, this is all going to be debated in the National Assembly because Emmanuel Macron thought there was enough support from the traditional right, the Republicans, and from other lawmakers in the National Assembly to get this bill pushed through with the support of his own Renaissance movement.
Was that not true?
And that was obviously not true. 170 Renaissance MPs, Renaissance being the grouping of Emmanuel Macron, 5 of them within that group voted against this legislation.
It's pretty, I would say this is pretty concerning because it's especially this is one of your key flagship policies as well for Macron. We know based off the last election that he just did enough. But considering if he's losing power, there it's a very worrying sign that Marine Le Pen is smelling blood in the water, shall we say. And it's a bit of a worrying time because the perception we have is that Le Pen is obviously a very dangerous person if she was to come to power. But it's looking like more and more, especially when we're talking about immigration here, and that obviously that's a very sensitive topic as it is. And this is something that Marine Le Pen is obviously and her party are using very strongly as a way of driving the wedge. And what's interesting here is what are the repercussions if Macron doesn't get his immigration bill through? Like, and the thing is like you're kind of torn between two sides here. So how can he possibly get it through if he can't appease left or the right here?
But the biggest victor of all of this is notably Marine Le Pen of the far right National Rally Party, who was rubbing her hands yesterday saying, yes, we've defeated this immigration bill, which we didn't want to go through because it doesn't go far enough. But on the left, they also voted against as well, saying
it goes too far.
It goes too far,
right.
And we should be giving these foreign workers more papers in France, allowing them to come in, allowing them to work to support the French economy. So both of those different sides who have really nothing in common came together and they have voted not to discuss this bill. So it's a big kick in the teeth for Emmanuel Macron and for Gérald Darmanin.
So,
yeah. Not good for the French president at all, really. It's I find it so fascinating. Just as a time when all the talk in the UK is about Rwanda and immigration and migration, and then we have this taking place in the same week. It's fascinating, isn't it? And I'm pretty sure this is probably not the only nation who's been having these conversations, of course.
well, Macron has gone to his interior minister, Gérald Darmanin, and said, listen, this is not the end. Right? You just got to tear it up and start all over. What's going to happen next?
So there are 3 possibilities facing Emmanuel Macron now. The first one is, of course, that he tries to push this bill through the Senate once again. But if the Senate, which it will go back to, reads it again, that's controlled by the right wing, it'll become even more hard line than it is already.
So the 3 options from Macron: project returns for a Senate for a second reading if it's examined by a mixed commission of MP. All the text is withdrawn.
That's to say, removing dangerous immigrants from France, limiting family regrouping of those who've come to this country to work, an automatic end to state medical aid, and less legalisation of workers in certain sectors of French society, working in industry, for example, or in hospitals and in schools. So that risk being the case. The second point that he could do is to have it examined by a group of MPs and senators. Not sure that is going to work out. He could even withdraw the legislation completely, but that would be a huge failure for Emmanuel Macron. Will he dissolve the National Assembly, call fresh elections, try to get a majority? That looks pretty unlikely, because he probably wouldn't get that majority, and his party would be even worse affected afterwards, and that would hand Marine Le Pen probably a majority on a plate. So it's not an easy juggling act for the president right now, but Gérald Darmanin is, for the moment, still in his job.
Not a good time for Emmanuel Macron. Let's put it that way, guys. I think it's a very difficult situation, to say the least. Let's finish reading the rest of it, you guys. So the adoption of the motion has led to the interruption of the examination of the legislation's roughly 200,600 proposed amendments. The bill now leans firmly towards the enforcement of its earlier passage through the upper house Senate, which is controlled by the right. The government will now send the legislation to a so-called mixed parliamentary commission made of upper house senators and lower house MPs in a bid to thrash out a compromise text, the government spokesperson Olivier Véran told reporters. It would start to work as soon as possible, he said. The compromise version would still have to be backed by both houses of parliament, with no guarantee it will not face the same obstacles in the National Assembly. The government could once again opt to trigger Article 49.3 of the Constitution, which allows it to pass legislation without a vote, as it did with consensus pension reforms earlier this year. But the government wants to avoid wielding this widely unpopular, controversial constitutional hammer, which can also trigger a no-confidence vote. We do not want that. The far right called for the dissolution of Parliament's lower house and early elections. Faced with this major political crisis, we must return to the people. Johnny Barana, the head of the far right Rassemblement National, the RN, declared on BFM TV. The left has said the bill should be dropped. In the neighbouring Britain's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak plans to stop irregular migration with deportation flights to Rwanda has also sparked a crisis. In both countries, the rise of a number of asylum seekers, a chronic affordable housing shortage and a cost of living crisis have worsened social tensions. Eric Cotty, the head of France Conservative, the Republicans LR, who cooperates is crucial, said he was ready to continue discussions but not without Dallaman. I'm open to discussions with the constitution of this text, but I will do it with the Prime Minister, Cotty said on Europe 1. But the outcome is deeply frustrating for Macron, whose French media are increasingly seeing a potential lame duck as he sits out the rest of his term without being able to stand for a third time in 2027. While the rejection is all above the failure of Gérald Darmanin, it also highlights the fact that the government has less and less control, said the Darmanin Daily. Immigration, guys. Immigration. You just can't get away with it, can we? So what do I make of it all, really? I fear for Emmanuel Macron. I really do, guys. I think he's in a very tight spot, and I'm sure there'll be obviously more discussions and more things taking place over the next couple of days by the time you guys hear about this story. God forbid if they do end up going to the elections, because even though they said that obviously they were saying in one poll there obviously the majority of the public support the bill. There's a lot of people who still, I try to think of it envisioning in the same way as the way America has with Trump, that Marine Le Pen still has a very strong support. And, Macron has been French president for a long time. Things, if things get, when the same people are in power for a long time, things get stale. Things sometimes, people want maybe something a little bit different, a little bit of change here and there. So it is a worrying thought, to say the least. But it's within EU laws, obviously, this bill. But it's a difficult time, shall we say, for Emmanuel Macron. Be interesting to see what happens as we go forward on that one, guys. So the next one I've got is a very short one here. It's more of about the tech industry, really. It's an exclusive little one from Reuters. So Apple offers to let rivals access tap and go tech in an EU antitrust case. So what is this about? So let's read into it. So Apple has offered to let rivals access its tap and go mobile payment system for uses for mobile wallets. Three people familiar with the matter said a move that could settle EU's antitrust charges and stave off a possible hefty fine. The EU's competition enforcer last year charged Apple with curbing rival access to its tap and go technology, near field communication NFC, making it difficult for them to develop rival services on Apple devices. It says it benefits Apple's own mobile wallet solution on iPhones and iPads, and pointed to the company's significant market power on the market for smart mobile devices and dominance in the mobile wallet markets. The European Commission is likely to see feedback next month from its rivals and customers before deciding whether to accept Apple's offer, the people said. They said the timing of the market test and whether it will go ahead could still change. The EU's watchdog declined to comment. Apple was not immediately available for comment before the US working hours. Apple Pay is used by more than 2,500 banks in Europe and over 250 fintechs and challenger banks. The NFC chip-enabled tap-and-go payments on iPhones and iPads. Apple faces a second charge of preventing Spotify and other music stream companies from informing users of other buying options outside its App Store in a case dating back from 2020. The Commission is expected to issue a decision next year that could include a fine and an order to stop its practice. Companies risk a fine of up to 10% of their global annual turnover if found guilty of breaching EU antitrust rules. So they may potentially be loosening up on competition in order to avoid getting a fine here. Apple is basically what the story is here. They still hold a significant chunk of the market, but it just screams to me greed. The greediness of them, and I just like that. It's just the same with Amazon, with Elon Musk, and Tesla. Like they all want to just dominate and just not give us an instant ounce of fair competition to anyone, and yeah, that's not fair. So I'm glad that we have someone like a place like the EU who will stand up and say no, you've got to be more fairer. So let's hope that the EU continues to pile pressure on these companies for the sake of people out there. Another one of interest, to say the least, guys. This is also an interesting one. We may or may not have remembered this story, guys, but we talked a bit about it before in the past. So this one is from CNN. So FBI chief in India following explosive US assassination plot indictment. So what is this about? So essentially there was a story a while ago about attempted assassination of somebody. But we'll read into it before I bring up the information that I remember call from it. So FBI Director Christopher Wade was in India this week for a trip aimed at strengthening security cooperation and deepening the partnership, but it comes in the wake of a major law enforcement issue between the two nations, one far more sinister with the potential to cause cracks within that alliance. So, just 2 weeks ago, the US accused an Indian government official of being involved in a conspiracy to kill an American citizen on its home soil. The citizen in question is Gurmeet Singh Parang, a Sikh separatist who is allegedly a target of a murder-for-hire plot in New York City. Yeah, so I covered it. I'm pretty more sure I covered it in a short or on the Snowflake Corner. That somebody was that there was a conspiracy theory that involved in the conspiracy that the Indian government to kill a Sikh separatist here, which is obviously a very deepening concern. And it was I hadn't seen anything else until this story. So I'm curious to see what the relationships are going to be like between the US and India, because it has been a couple of weeks since that's happened now. So Panam is a wanted man in India, considered by the government there as a terrorist and national security threat. But to some Sikhs overseas, Panam is an outspoken activist and a man rallying for a cause that has come to large unit swaths of the community's international diaspora. Apologies for mispronunciation. So late last month, US federal prosecutors charged an Indian national on the suspicion of trying to kill him, according to an explosive indictment which alleges the hitman was acting upon orders from an unnamed Indian government official. The stunning revelation came little more than a month after Canada's Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, publicly alleged that India may have been involved in the murder of another Sikh separatist, Hardeen Singh Nagar, on its soil, prompting a furious response from New Delhi and provoking a diplomatic fallout between the two countries. India has vehemently denied involvement in Nagar's murder. Yeah, they already had there was a row, obviously, between Canada and India. I remember that. But it's not a very good sign for them. The US plot was foiled, and the deaths and the details of the indictment have yet to be heard in court. But the episode has cast a dark shadow over New Delhi's credibility, wrote Sanjay Hadia, the diplomatic affairs editor of the Hindu newspaper, one of the recent editorials. And it has many asking, how badly has this hit New Delhi's ties with Washington? India's government has denied any involvement in the alleged plot to kill Pukam, but in contrast to the vocal condemnations made after Canada's accusation, it has set up a high-level committee to investigate the accusations in the US indictment. As regards to the case against an individual, it has been filed in the US court, allegedly linking him to an Indian official. This is a matter of concern, India's foreign ministry said after the indictment was revealed. The cause Pyongyang had been campaigning for the creation of a separatist Sikh homeland, one that would be known as Kalakishkam, apologies if I mispronounce it, and include the state of Punjab in India. Kalakishkan has long been outlawed in the world's largest democracies, where painful memories of a deadly insurgency by some Sikh separatists to continue to haunt many Indian citizens. But it garners a level of sympathy among some in the Sikh diaspora overseas, where protections by free speech laws like people like Pyongyang are able to openly advocate for secession from India. The topic was highly charged 4 decades ago. India's former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was assassinated by her Sikh bodyguards after she sent army troops charging inside the religious holy shrine to flush out separatists that may have been harbouring inside. That operation, known as the Blue Star, destroyed much of the building and left hundreds dead. This was in June the 9th, 1984. The photo of the damaged Tusk after the army's actions. Operation Blue Star. Riots broke out in the days after Gandhi's murder, killing some 30,000 people, predominantly Sikhs, according to the official figures, in one of the worst outbreaks of communal violence since India's partition. In the years since, those pursuing the Kalashkan cause have formed a minority in Punjab, given the government's banning of the movement, and linked extremism but doesn't pose a significant threat to the country, analysis said. But seeking reconciliation for what they view as human rights abuses committed against their community, several overseas Sikh organisations continue to advocate for Punjab's succession and said that the Khalistane's movement is being falsely equated with terrorism by the Indian government. Despite this, the government's response to campaigns overseas remain robust, particularly under the current Prime Minister Narendra Modi. India went through very difficult phases with the Khalistan movement in the 1980s. It defined their national security, said Harsh Pank, the vice president of the Observer Research Foundation, a New Delhi think tank. Therefore, the Indian state tends to take a very serious view of those things. And Pyongyang, a Sikh separatist wanted by the Indian government, was a close associate of Naya, who was also wanted by India for terrorist-related offences. Afari Oldador Pyongyang have repeatedly made comments that they are perceived as secessionists and threatening towards India and its government. He is wanted on more than a dozen terrorism charges in India and accused of trying to radicalise his communities in support of the creation of Khalistan, an independent Sikh homeland that would include parts of India. India has outlawed the US-based secession group Sikh for Justice, headed by Pyongyang, which hold referendums among diaspora groups in support of Khalistan. In a widely circulated video last month, he warned Sikhs not to fly Air India on November the 19th, citing danger to their lives. Headlines reiterated across India in the days following claims Pyongyang was threatening to blow up the aircraft. Pyongyang told CNN he was not surprised by the indictment outlined the foil plot to kill him. The government of India has officially declared a reward on my head for running the global Khalistan referendum campaign, he said, referring to votes as the Sikh diaspora around the world have held on gathering support for a separatist homeland. Asked by CNN if he was a threat to India, New Delhi claims, he replied, "While my advocacy surely challenges India's territorial integrity, this challenge is through ballots and not bullets. Hence, the challenge I pose is not considered terrorism under UN and international law. On his remarks about Air India, he said the comments from the India media were often misrepresented. My video is to boycott Air India, not bomb, he said. This is a disinformation tactic of India's Modi government to equate a non-violence call of boycott with terrorism. Analysts said Pyongyang's inflammatory rhetoric and the media hype that surrounds him in India could provoke backlash from citizens and prompt a government response. When you have said something that makes these statements regularly and Indian media broadcasts them, it takes the conversation beyond the confines of diplomacy, Pence said. Many Indians might ask why the US government is tolerating such behaviour. The public perception of the danger that may be higher than the damage itself. This is pro-independent Khalistan flag seen at the Guru Nanak Sikh Dara Temple, the site of the June 2024 killing of Sikh leader in Surrey. So that's their flag. To some, the Indian government's alleged pursuit of an American citizen on its home soil might appear risky and put a dent in the relations between the countries that have recently rapidly strengthened economic, technological and defensive ties. However, analysts said the chances of a major fallout are low, as both are committed to countering the rise of neighbouring superpowers as they view a joint concern, China. The common wisdom is that the US and India need each other for vital strategic purposes. Above all, to mount an effective front in competition with China, said Daniel S. Markey, Senior Advisor South Asia for the United States Institute of Peace. Therefore, they will manage this issue without being sidetracked for that mission, and to date the two sides have avoided acrimonious public statements pledging to take the matter seriously. And there is recent past precedent for this side of pragmatic realpolitik. Can't say that one, guys, I'm really sorry. The murder in Saudi Arabia's Istanbul constitute of Jamal Khashoggi. That was a horrible one. A US resident and Washington Post columnist critical of the Saudi government caused global outrage and US condemnation at the time, but ultimately the vital relationship between Washington and the Rajad has been stabilised. In a statement on Monday announcing Wad's visit, India's Central Bureau of Investigation, the equivalent to the FBI, said their meeting signified a step towards deepening cooperation and shared commitment to combat crime in all its manifestations in the spirit of international police cooperation. The statement did not mention the US indictment. So, we don't know for certain if India are involved in it, and I think we need to be very careful not to say that. We have to stress it's obviously allegations, but the sad thing is that if they were responsible, the Indian government, there's not going to be any repercussions whatsoever. There's not going to be a fallout of per se. I don't feel between them and America, especially given what we've just read there. And he's right. China is considered a threat to Western democracy, obviously, and they will not want that relationship to be damaged. But India have always considered ceased to be a threat, and obviously given the history that there is as well. Why is it always? It's always religion, isn't it? It's always religion that comes down to these things at the end of it all, and it's just they're people, the people and culture that they believe in, and they want to have a land to call their own within India, and I just don't ever see that happening. Maybe not until for decades to come, but perhaps maybe things will change in the future. But right now, I don't see anything that's going to hamper relations between the two nations, in my honest opinion. But it's a real shame that someone may have allegedly been silenced by the Indian government just because of what they are saying and standing for what they believe is their rights. That their people have been silenced and kept quiet and gone into the abyss. It's important to highlight these, sometimes. And I would just say I hope they can find solace at some point. But yeah, unfortunately, the world stage must take priority over the smallest of people, which is not right, obviously, to say the least, guys. So let's break away a little bit. Let's break things up a little bit, because I've got a lot of articles to talk about, but I didn't want it to be all doom and gloom sort of thing. So here's a little funny video, guys, just to break the ice per se for you guys. I hope you guys enjoy this one.
Before granting you entry to Vatican City, you must first answer these simple questions. What is the most popular guidebook used by visitors in the Vatican City?
The Da Vinci Code.
See, the Vatican City is an independent state and the spiritual and administrative center of a what?
The world's largest property owners.
See, when was the Vatican given its own sovereignty?
When in Rome.
See, what type of women work in the Vatican?
None.
See, Vatican City is the smallest country in the world, but the largest the what?
Tax haven.
See, what is the biggest cover-up in Vatican City history?
Women's shoulders.
See, when have papal elections been controversial?
When they've gone up in smoke.
Yeah, see, why is there a small wooded area within the Vatican?
So the Pope can go to the toilet.
See, although landlocked, the Vatican City is controlled by a what?
The Holy See.
See, what do you use to transfer money within the Vatican?
A papal PayPal.
See, the Vatican is responsible for one of the greatest works of art of all the time. What is it?
It's The Exorcist.
See, what a brilliant movie!
Yeah.
What do you use to create the white smoke out of the Sistine Chapel on the election of a new pope?
Potassium chloride, pine resin, and parish records.
See, the test has ended. Go in peace.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Yeah. So.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Where are you going?
That's what it's like to try and getting past Vatican City immigration, guys. Foil and Arms, guys. Foil and Arms. If you haven't seen it already, their YouTube channel, go give them a subscribe, like, share, all that stuff. Go watch the video on their channel, guys. Definitely do that. So, next video, guys. While you're here, just a faithful little reminder while you guys are mingling in the Premier Chat. Don't forget to hit the like button, share this across social media, and hit that bell notification icon so you'll be notified when I upload another video, guys. Really, really helpful. And if you're not a subscriber, subscribe and help me get to that 500 mark so that I can apply for YouTube membership. So this next one here, guys, is less of an article but more of an analysis, and I'm very fascinated to read this with you guys. And this is from Sky News. The headline is Donald Tusk has buckled Europe's populist trend but faces a daunting agenda as Poland's new Prime Minister. The Polish returned to Brussels this week as a member of the European Council rather than its president, and will face a fascinating contrast between himself and his successor Charles Michel. Yeah, so populist has been one of the biggest trends, obviously, across the Western nations. And Tusk has seemed to have buckled that in Poland, and lots of nations will be looking to see what did he do and what they can implement to try and stop this rise in populace, because it is a great threat to so-called democracy and it needs to be challenged. But obviously that he may have stopped it, but now the challenge is now he has to deliver for the people of Poland. How is he going to do that? Be interesting to say the least. So the return of Donald Tusk won't just create ripples in Poland, but all over Europe. There aren't many European politicians with a truly pan-continental standing, but he is one of them. Before returning to Polish politics, where he had previously spent 7 years as Prime Minister, Tusk had been President of the European Council. It is not an easy job because it involves trying to trying to corral the leaders of all members of the European Union into agreeing on a common position, which is rather like herding particularly skittish cats. I wouldn't put it that way. I would call it as a bunch of out of control sheep, and you're trying to herd them all together, and they just won't cooperate sometimes. Tusk's reputation was high when he left the job, and he's steadily grown thanks to the underwhelming performance of his successor, Charles Michel, an ambient politician who has struggled to impose himself on the global stage. Tusk is expected to return to Brussels later this week as a member of the Council rather than its president, and will present a fascinating contrast between the two. By that point, Tusk will have already had to set his domestic agenda in train. His first task will be to try and unwind some of the actions of his predecessor, Mazowiecki, who introduced laws restraining the freedoms of the courts. Yeah, he will try to unwield that and give the courts back the powers that they had before, because if courts don't have the powers to, basically you're taking away democracy if you don't have laws that can challenge the government, and they need to have those laws back. Those in turn have led to concern over the so-called rule of law, and has led to tens of billions of euros of EU funding being held up. Tusk needs to find a way through that, despite the apathy and more likely opposition of the country's president, Andrzej Duda. Duda, whose presidential term runs until 2025, can exercise a veto over parliamentary decisions, and has already made clear that he is in no hurry to let Tusk roll back Moscowski's work. On the contrary, by giving Morawiecki first go at forming a majority government, which was always going to be an impossible task, he simply allowed the outgoing Prime Minister to make last-minute changes and appointments that will hinder the new government. All this will make Tusk's leadership even tougher juggling act, particularly because he's the only Prime Minister due to a coalition of parties largely united by a single factor that they wanted to get rid of Morawiecki. That held them together during the election, but things will become different now. Tusk will also want to push through a budget, loosen the shackles imposed by Morawiecki over the Polish media, and reinforce a relationship with the neighbouring Ukraine that, while strong, has shown signs of strain over the past year. It is a daunting agenda, but Tusk has been through the mill. While Morawiecki's PIS remained the biggest party in the parliament by seats, few doubt that Tusk has momentum and motivation driving him on. His supporters were so excited about his ascension to power that they crowded into cinemas to watch live coverage of the parliamentary proceedings. Wow! This is how happy people are. In a cinema just to watch the parliamentary proceeding. I've never seen that before. On a wider scale, there is another important element to Tusk's triumph. European politicians have recently been a tale of electoral victories for candidates who are either nationalistic, populist, or often both. Giorgia Meloni in Italy and Jarl Wilders in the Netherlands, the Swedish Democrats and the Finns, all have positioned themselves as being strong leaders who are the alternative to the mainstream politicians. Tusk has buckled the trend, a highly experienced politician who has won from the centre-right against an opponent who combines strength of populism, nationalism and authoritarianism. In the coming weeks and months won't be easy for him as his government, not least when the Prime Minister and President clash, but Poland is about to enter a new phase. I really hope the guy can deliver for the people of Poland. I really, really do. And wind back some of the laws that have been put in place by the last government. Obviously, there are going to be clashes between him and the president. That is unfortunately inevitable, but he must try to keep that all those coalitions together, and consistently they need to be reminded that our country's history rides on this. Our future and its people ride on what happens next here, and it's really, really important that they unite to oust extremism and authoritarianism. It's going to be very difficult. It's going to be very challenging. And I wish him all the best. I really, really do, guys. It's going to be a tough battle, to say the least, guys. So the next one here, guys, it's pretty much everything here. It's more of a European live stream rather than a world one, guys. To be fair, I didn't get enough. Maybe I didn't get enough topics on the world stage, and I apologise for that. But this one is from the Guardian guide. So the EU have agreed tough limits on police use of AI biometric surveillance. So the measures ban the use of real-time data without judicial authoritarianism in nearly all circumstances and cover both public and private spaces. There needs to be a line. So before, obviously, we read into it, obviously, there needs to be obviously a line between where there's a need for security and then there's a need for privacy, and there needs to be a fine line in that regard. And we're talking about the use of our artificial intelligence being used here, which is extremely dangerous, as you guys know. Artificial intelligence is extremely dangerous stuff if it's not managed and well controlled. And I'm glad that they want to put real tough limits on this, and rightly so, because you don't want to give these AI companies full control, because the danger that they could have, the amount of information that they could gather could be really dangerous. So, police and national security bodies in the EU will be banned from using real-time biometric data driven by artificial intelligence in most circumstances, without having judicial authorization. It has emerged. The measure was part of a historic agreement between the European Parliament and EU member states on Friday after 3 days of negotiations. However, officials only revealed the operational details on Monday, as the final text will not be published until a cleaning up process is complete. The ban on Big Brother surveillance will apply in public and private spaces, ranging from parks to sports grounds, except in events of specific serious crimes, a terrorist threat, or urgent search for victims. Even then, police will require approval from a judge or independent administrative authority first. Yep, that makes total sense. You know, if in an absolute critical emergency situation, they should obviously be given the powers to do that. If it means saving a life or stopping a crime, that kind of stuff, that makes total sense here to allow it in those circumstances, of course. Only in the most exceptional circumstances, such as live terrorist threat, will police be able to switch on the AI biometrics tool without the judge giving the green light. Okay, that seems reasonable. However, under the new rules, they must still be obtained authorization within 24 hours and provide the appropriate authority with a prior fundamental rights impact assessment, according to an EU official with knowledge of the text. They must also notify the relevant market surveillance authority and the data protection authority. If permission from the judge or authority is not forthcoming, the AI tool must be switched off and all data extracted on the suspect or suspects deleted immediately, the official said. And how's that going to be managed? Question mark. According to officials, these safeguards will avert what has been termed predictive policing, with MEPs feared that they will use alongside rational profiling to discriminate against individuals. One EU official said it would mean that law enforcement authorities would not be allowed to pursue someone as a suspect just because of an algorithm says you are a criminal. In total, the EU and MEPs have agreed to a specific list of 16 types of serious crimes where this exception to the surveillance ban may apply. The exceptions were terrorism, murder, rape, organised or armed robbery, grievous bodily injury, child sex abuse, kidnapping, hostile taking, crimes under the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court, unlawfully seizing aircraft or ship, sabotage, trafficking human beings, body part, illegal drugs, weapons and radioactive material in participation in a criminal organisation involved in one of these offences. Each country must be compliant with these AI provisions within 6 months of the laws going into the EU statutory books or in the EU's Gazette of Records, the official journal. The new laws govern artificial intelligence in the EU will also include other bans to guard against the risk that AI poses to society and life. They include AI systems or applicants that manipulate human behavior to circumvent users' free will, such as toys using voice assistant encouraging dangerous behavior of minors. They also include a ban on AI systems that allow social scoring by governments or companies, similar to China's system of social credit. The EU insists on this in the final text, amid fears that such AI-derived data will be used to explore the vulnerabilities of people with respect to their age, disability, or social or economic situation. It might have meant, for instance, that certain customers could be banned from restaurants based on their social score or status, with certain employees would be ruled out of jobs. Emotional recognition artificial intelligence which can read people's facial expressions in real time to assess stress or fatigue, will also be prohibited in the workplace. MEPs leading the fight for probations were determined to ensure that the EU did not turn to a surveillance state like China, where traffic police can intervene, for example, if they think a lorry driver is tired. Yeah. Yeah, people need to be able to have rights. I welcome this. I welcome this move by the EU, and I hope all the European nations get on board with it. Obviously, there's going to be someone somewhere saying that they don't. Probably may be a little bit fickle about it. But this is to ensure the safety and well-being, and also protection of rights of those within the European Union, of course. So I think it's a very good one, and hopefully, maybe at some point in the future, the UK may do such a thing as well. But I'm just holding my breath on that one, if I'm honest, guys. Right, so the next one we've got here, guys. This one is we're going to Ukraine. I've got one news feed for you guys. I may look at a couple of other news feeds potentially, depending on time, but we'll see. So this one here is from the Kiev Independent. The headline is Military Intelligence Hacks Russian Tax Authorities. Where? Tax authorities? What's all this about? So Ukrainian cyber units hacked into thousands of servers of the Russia's tax system, extracting sensitive information before destroying the tax database. The Ukraine's military agency, the HUR, said on the 12th of December. The news followed reports that on November the 29th, that HUR orchestrated the hacking of television channels in Crimea to broadcast a speech by President Volodymyr Zelensky. That the security service of Ukraine hacked into the website of Russia's Labour Ministry. According to the HUR, Defense Ministry and Military Intelligence Cyber Unit hacked into the central server of the Federal Tax Service, as well as 2,300 regional servers in Russia and Russian-occupied Crimea, infecting them with malware. The entire database of the tax system was destroyed, as well as backup copies, HUR had said. Intelligence suggests that Russia will not be able to fully resuscitate its tax system. The Russia IT company Office.ie IT.IE, which operates a database of the Federal Tax Service, was also a victim of a similar attack. The hacks result in the complete destruction of the infrastructure in one of the main state bodies of Russia and revealed a multitude of tax data which is now in the hands of Ukraine, the HUR had said. HUR did not specify the exact date of the hack, but said that Russia had been unsuccessfully trying to restore the work of the Russian tax authorities for the fourth day in a row. Experts estimate that the Federal Tax Service will not be fundamental for at least a month. The news comes after a massive hacker reported on the 12th of December by Morrow Bank, one of the UK's largest banks and telecommunication companies, Kyivstar. Russia has been reportedly accused of backing cybercrime in attacks against its rivals. Moscow has also deployed its cyber capabilities against Ukraine, including attacks on government institutions, its defensive sector and energy infrastructure. Now, obviously, it's be quite an attack here if they have successfully done that. That would not be good for obviously ordinary Russian people, not being able to have sort out their taxes. I think that's if it is true, then hats off to them if it's been successful. But that's quite damning to say the least. So obviously things are pretty, like most of the new feeds that I've seen, there hasn't been too many offensives on either side. It's been very quiet. Obviously the kind of both sides are kind of entrenched at the moment, so they're looking at other ways of attacking each other, and this is one of them. And it'll be interesting to see how Russia will respond to this. I'm sure that they will respond at some point, if not by the time you guys see this story. But certainly damaging, to say the least, if it is to proven to be the case, guys. So before we go to I've got two more stories for you guys, but before we go into them, we tried getting into one immigration office. Shall we try getting past another one, guys? Let's try getting past another one, shall we?
Before granting you entry to Egypt, you must first answer these simple questions. Is Egypt a democratic nation? Correct. Who is the most popular pharaoh?
Mo Salah.
Correct. Egypt is known as a very fertile land. Why?
Because it has the largest population in the Arab world.
Which of the pyramids gets the highest tourist attendance per year?
The one in Las Vegas.
Correct, unfortunately. In terms of family life in Egypt, who is the most influential?
The mummy.
Correct. The pyramids at Giza generate 1.2 million what for Egypt every year?
Conspiracy theories.
What is the most serious traffic violation in Egypt?
Parking in the Suez Canal.
That's right, don't do it. There will be a fine. Name the 2 ways in which an Egyptian president can leave office.
It's death or coup d'etat.
That's right, either he goes or he goes in a box. Where is Upper Egypt?
At the bottom.
Where is Lower Egypt?
It's at the top.
Which recent Netflix series was criticized by Egyptians for its alleged historical inaccuracies?
Scorpion King 5, Book of Souls.
Yes, a disgrace. Which merciless pharaoh ruled Egypt for 3 decades, leaving behind a legacy of repression, brutality, and stolen treasure?
Mubarak.
And lastly, what can be said to be Egypt's darkest hour?
Walk Like an Egyptian, the Bangles.
Correct. I hate that song! I will get your files. Welcome to Egypt.
Great.
This is enough,
Easy enough, yeah.
God,
no,
it's not like
over
what you'd
here.
expect,
No,
is it?
well, the stereotypes are way off.
Yeah.
There you go, guys. Now you know how to get past immigration in Egypt. Excuse me. Guys, we're almost near at the end. We've got 2 more stories here for you guys. If you can, of course, it would be greatly appreciated. Hit the like button, share it across social media. If you can, hit the bell notification icon so you'll be notified when I upload another video. And guys, as we get closer to Christmas, if you want to financially support me, which you're under no obligations to do so, you can do so by joining me on Patreon or buy me a coffee. Both of the links are in the description, guys. So their options are there if you want to support me with them as well. So guys, we've got 2 more to go. Here we go. So this one is from the Kiev Post, guys. I don't know if you've obviously been aware, so there's been a lot of talk about what's been happening on the border between Finland and Russia. And then I saw this and I was thinking, already? So the headline is Finland says to reopen parts of the border with Russia. Following an influx of migrants in mid-November, Finland closed 4 of its 8 border crossings with Russia. So obviously they stopped basically coming through, but they've already opening parts of the border from the looks of it. So let's read into it. So Finland will reopen 2 crossings on its border with Russia, its Prime Minister said on Tuesday, after Helsinki in November shut its frontiers, accusing Moscow of orchestrating a surge in migrants. Yeah, so we were aware obviously about there was a surge, that Russia was pushing a surge of migrants to Finland's border from their side. The government has decided to keep the eastern border closed, except for 2 border crossing points, the Prime Minister Petteri Orpo had said. Helsinki will open its southeastern border crossing points of Valmiina and Narita on Thursday. So by the time you guys see this, they'll be open. Orpo said that the restrictions have been eased in order to assess whether there is a change for the better, unless of course something changes within that time. If the phenomenon continues, we will close these border crossings, he's added. Following an influx of migrants in mid-November, Finland closed 4 of its 8 border crossings with Russia before restricting passage only to the northernmost crossing. And that was too close. That too was close by the end of November. The Nordic country, which shares a 1,340 kilometre, that's 830-mile border with Russia, has seen nearly 1,000 migrants arrive without a visa through its eastern border crossing since August. This is an organised activity, not a genuine emergency, Orpo said of the surge. Russian foreign military spokeswoman Maria Zakharika denied at the time that Russia was acting deliberately. Finnish authorities maintain that the surge in migrant numbers may continue. It is possible that Russia will continue its operation, the Prime Minister said. The European Union's Border Protection Agency Frontex deployed some 50 guards to watch Finland's border with Russia in December. Finland's relation with its eastern neighbour soured after the invasion of Ukraine. Moscow warned of countermeasures after Finland joined NATO in April, reversing its decade-long policy of military non-alignment. Yeah, they promised something, but they haven't delivered on it yet there. But interesting to see that they've opened some of the borders there. That is for sure, guys. And I think as long as they are being careful about it, and I'm sure the Finland are being extremely cautious about every single part of it, to say the least. It is a bit worrying to say that it is a bit of a worry, though. That is for sure. So, last story for you guys. I hope you guys are finding them interesting as I am. Well, this one is from Byline Times, guys. So, is it time to welcome Ukraine into NATO? Now, obviously, at the time of this recording, there will be much discussion Zelensky will have had in America, among some other places as well. So, the article things may have changed since by the time you have read this, guys. So, in the midst of war, Ukraine has made exceptional progress in meeting the requirements for joining the alliance, argues Mark Tumursky. So, let's read into this, guys. So, this summer, dozens of international leaders and defensive representatives gathered in Lithuania for the 2023 NATO summit. At the top of the agenda were Russia's ongoing invasion of Ukraine and how the international community can help end the war. Today, tens of thousands of Ukrainians have perished, a quarter of Ukrainians' population is displaced, countless villages and cities have been destroyed. Despite these hardships, the Ukrainians have shown they are determined to defend their country over the summer. Ukrainian forces have launched a new chaos offensive that saw them reclaim formerly Russia-occupied territory, following up on the similar successes last year. It has, to be fair, slowed since then, in all honesty. Some progress was made at this summer's summit. The alliance reaffirmed its commitment to helping Ukraine. It removed Ukraine's requirement to complete a membership action plan, and it established the NATO-Ukraine Council. But Ukraine was disappointed it did not receive an official invitation to join NATO. That this was an event in remarkable change to the NATO-Ukraine relations before the Russian invasion in 2022. The prospects of Ukraine entering the alliance seemed slim. During the 2008 NATO Budapest summit, NATO officials opened the door for Ukraine and Georgia's eventual membership. The discussion of future membership, however, were vague. Previous calls to admit Ukraine into the alliance were delayed, and the Ukrainians wondered if membership would even ever occur. For example, a study on NATO enlargement states that candidate countries must encourage support for democratic reform. For years, Ukraine had been fighting a war against corruption. Ukrainian politicians and officials have conducted shady business with their Russian counterparts. Numerous parts of the government were outdated, and Westerners were hesitant to invest in Ukraine to help it reform and rebuild. NATO members stated that Ukraine needed to heavily address its corruption and vastly reform its government before being considered for a potential membership. Second, the Ukrainian military was outdated. When Russia first launched its invasion in Ukraine in 2014, only 20% of the country's armed forces were combat efficient. The Ukrainians operated with old equipment and they struggled during the initial stages of the war. Aside from these setbacks, the Ukrainian military in 2014 did not meet NATO defensive standards. Third, several NATO members argued that inviting Ukraine to NATO would aggravate Russia. These countries argued that Russia could escalate its hybrid warfare tactics in and around Ukraine and that the consequences would be dire. Russia had previously conducted counterattacks such as shutting off Ukraine's power grid, and some in the international community considered that Russia would escalate its various forms of attack on Ukraine. This option gained traction after the first Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2014, where Russia illegally annexed Crimea in occupied Ukrainian territory in the Donbass. Now, this past reluctance for Ukraine's potential membership into NATO is gone. Since the first Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2014, Ukraine has undergone numerous institutional reforms. Under the guidance of the European Union, the Ukrainians vastly improved their government, made critical changes to their judicial system, and they improved their security sector. These efforts, among others, gradually led to Ukraine signing an association agreement with the European Union. In addition, the Ukrainians were awarded visa-free travel to the European Union. Most recently, Ukraine was granted EU candidate status, and senior European officials have commended Ukraine's work. These events suggest that Ukraine is serious about its anti-corruption initiative. EU officials will now be preparing potential accession talks with Ukraine during the upcoming European Council meeting this week. In addition, Ukraine has vastly modernized its military from 2014 to 2022. The Ukrainians have participated in numerous training exercises with NATO. For example, NATO's military exercise in Operational Rapid Trident contributed to Ukraine's continued defensive modernization. The Ukrainians have also implemented numerous defensive reforms to enhance bolster their military. Ukrainian armed forces have learned from their American and European counterparts, and this has formed an invaluable partnership between NATO and Ukraine. Given these events, several NATO members are now calling for Ukrainians to join their ranks this year. Poland and the Baltic countries stated that their neighbours should be welcomed into the alliance. Similarly, the United Kingdom supports creating a fast-track option plan for Ukraine. Even France, one of NATO's more traditional members, has called for NATO membership plan for Ukraine. According to Iva Siskova, the deputy head of the Office of the Ukrainian President, support for Ukraine's membership in NATO has been gaining momentum. In an interview this summer, Siskova claimed that 20 of NATO's 31 member states had agreed in writing that they support Ukraine becoming a member of NATO. Even NATO's Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has stated that Ukraine's rightful place is in NATO. This was reiterated during the recent October 2023 NATO Defence Ministers Summit in Brussels, where Stoltenberg said that all 31 NATO members said that Ukraine will be a part of NATO. It was also discussed during the inaugural NATO-Ukrainian Council meeting on the 29th of November. So what has changed? Following the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2014, the Ukrainian government began to work closely with NATO, participating in numerous drills and exercises and undergoing defence reforms to modernise their military. This allows them to become interoperated, with the West, and explains why Ukrainian forces are currently using Western weaponry with ease. This hard work saw Ukraine promote the status of the NATO Enhanced Opportunities Partner, and it is the only one of 5 non-NATO members to hold this title. Ukraine has also made progress in relationship with NATO over its past 2 decades. The Russians have used Ukraine as a cyber testing ground. This has forced the Ukrainians to learn how to combat these cyber attacks and become experts in cybersecurity. This knowledge and experience would be significantly benefit to the alliance. This skill set has also not gone unnoticed. Ukraine was recently invited to join NATO's Cooperative Cyber Defensive Centre of Excellence, the CCDCOE, as a full member. This suggests that the alliance values Ukraine's cyber expertise. But what about the scourge of corruption? So according to a study on NATO enlargement, candidate countries must encourage and support democratic reforms. Critics argue that Ukraine must implement a series of anti-corruption reforms. But this is also something Ukraine has successfully addressed, and which has been sped up by the war. As for the Ukrainians continue to fight for their freedoms, they realise that they cannot afford corruption in their government, as it will delay any integration with the West. Over the past 2 years, Ukrainian officials have been working with the European counterparts to implement crucial reforms. In recent reports, the European Council acknowledged the considerable efforts that Ukraine has made under very difficult circumstances. The former President Pedro Poroshenko and the current President Vladimir Zelensky has worked tirelessly to pursue their country's Western aspirations. Under Poroshenko, the Ukrainian government rewrote the constitution to specify their country's desire to join Western institutions and organizations. The work of Poroshenko's administration was highlighted in 2017 when Ukraine was awarded a visa-free travel to the European Union. Similarly, Zelensky has worked hard to implement the new reforms, resulting in being awarded the EU candidate status. Zelensky most recently met with the heads of the European Union in Kiev, where they praised Ukraine's anti-corruption efforts and the progress made. Now Ukraine's full membership has been rumoured to be an agenda item during the December 2023 European Commission meeting. So despite these successes for Ukraine, there are Westerners who are still concerned about Russia. To these critics, admitting Ukraine into the alliance would only escalate Russia's war, and they are worried that the conflict would be worsened. But Zelensky believes that these arguments should be dismissed. In his speech this summer ahead of the NATO summit, Zelensky addressed the topic of NATO membership and Ukrainians' place in the alliance. And we understand that Ukraine cannot be a member of NATO during the war, Zelensky said in his address to the Ukraine parliament. But we need to be sure that after the war we will be. That is the signal we want to get, that after the war Ukraine will be a member of NATO. In the same address, Zelensky said, some states and world leaders still unfortunately look back at Russia when making their own decision. This is a shameful self-limitation of sovereignty because Ukraine proved that Russia should not be feared. Zelensky is right in this assessment. Prior to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, there was a general belief that Russia had the second strongest armed military in the world. Russia's failure in Ukraine, however, has shown that the Russian military is not as strong as initially believed. For nearly 2 years, the Ukrainians have shown that Russia does not have a second strongest military in the world, but instead, the Russians have the second strongest military in Ukraine. In addition, Russia's aggression has encouraged other countries across Europe to cooperate with NATO more closely. For example, following the Russian invasion, Finland and Sweden submitted membership applications to join the alliance. Finland became the organisation's 31st member, and Sweden will soon become the 32nd member. Even historically neutral countries such as Switzerland are working more closely with NATO. These developments have shown that Russia's unnecessary and unjust war have helped further unify the European continent. Given these developments, the pressing a clear path forward for Ukraine's eventual membership could be next on the agenda at the NATO summit next year. By then, NATO members will have an opportunity to make history. They should not squander this moment. What a fascinating piece that was, guys. Will we see it, guys? Will we see Ukraine a member of NATO? Time will only tell, guys. I think that was a fascinating piece to read. And Ukraine, yes, there is absolutely no question. There is work to do still in Ukraine, and no one is denying that. But they have come a long way from once they once were, guys. A puppet of Russia, a part of the Soviet Union, and they are fighting for their freedom every single day, guys. And they need all the support that they can get, for that. And I hope that they do find their way, not just into NATO, but perhaps even into the European Union. And I think it would be a massive, it would be quite a contrasting change of how times have on time, given where they have come from, guys. And on that, guys, I want to say thank you to each and every one of you who have come and watched the premiere, who are here in the chat. Obviously, I can't see you guys because it's not live, of course, so please understand that. But if you have, thank you guys so much for coming along and watching this. I hope you found it interesting. I don't think I'll be bringing back World Newsround anytime soon. But hopefully next week on Thursday I will have another Snowflakes Corner for you guys, but we'll have to wait and see, obviously. But before we go, guys, I just want to say, if you can, before you head out, hit the like button, we greatly appreciate it. Share this across social media, hit that bell notification icon so you'll be notified of when I upload another video. And of course, if you want to financially support me, you can do so by buying me a coffee or joining me on Patreon. So thanks again for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.